Hello, this is Father Rich coming to you from my bed in my bedroom. This is a place I associate with a series of books that I got that over the years from some generous friends and parishioners. So we're here for the 75 masterpieces every Christian should know. And so this series, it's these letter-bound books that are beautiful. And there's all kinds of topics. This one is A Year with the Saints, Daily Meditations with Holy Ones of God, our Daily Bread devotional collection. This is actually a different publisher, but similar kind of concept. But this is also the Tan series here, I think, or St. Benedict Press, I guess. A Year with the Mystics, Visionary Wisdom for Daily Living. A Year with the Eucharist, Daily Meditations on the Blessed Sacrament. We have this Eucharistic renewal coming up, so I look forward to looking at that. Cultivating Virtue, Self-Mastery with the Saints. And again, this is Tan. So several of them Tan, but other publishers, these daily meditations, just good stuff. But the one that I'm referring to today is one that's called Poems Every Catholic Should Know. And I have to admit, poetry is an area that I struggle with a little bit to really appreciate. So I will not be doing a series on this book, Poems Every Catholic Should Know. But I think 6 of the masterpieces that are covered in our book on the 75 masterpieces are found in this book. And the first one that we come across, because they do it chronologically too, are the Holy Sonnets of John Donne. This is 1633, the Holy Sonnets. And it's a series of 19 poems that they say are very very strong in their humanness and their openness to expressing the struggles with God. Almost like the Psalms, a modern day version of the Psalms. The author of the Masterpiece book says it this way: written during a time of intense spiritual struggle and crowded with startling and unexpected images, the Holy Sonnets is one of the most consistently surprising cycles of poems in the English language. So Donne was English. He was actually born Catholic in the 1570s. He, of course, that time when there was tension between the Catholics and the Anglicans in the Church of England that had been started by Henry VIII earlier in the 1500s. He eventually would enter law school, even though and at this time, right around the age of 25, kind of started questioning his Catholic faith and started kind of being more interested in the Anglican. He actually had St. Thomas More, who, his family was part of his family tree. So he had this very Catholic kind of identity he was born into, but yet was being drawn towards the Anglican Church. And so as he was doing this, he also started writing poetry in his 20s. And much of his early poetry, before he had a kind of a significant conversion, was somewhat focused on love and relationship and somewhat lustful, almost erotic at times. So that's kind of what, but he still showed this kind of desire and interest in writing poetry from a young age. But eventually he would be given a place in the court, in the king's kind of court, so to speak, and something that he aspired to and desired throughout his whole life. But then he met a girl, fell in love. She was not an approved marriage, and so he married her secretly, got exposed, and this lost his job. He actually fell into poverty for over a decade, they say. And in the midst of that, somehow he had been writing spiritually, kind of had a spiritual revival. In the midst of his writing, the king caught wind of it and said, "You shouldn't be trying to get back into my court and into kind of politics, so to speak. You should pursue priesthood." So he actually was eventually ordained an Anglican priest in, I think, 1615, even though he had a clear sense of his kind of unworthiness. We know that's been a theme in several of the masterpieces, but really struggled with that on some level, kind of similar to Martin Luther. But became ordained. His wife died, sadly. From that loss came a lot of his poetry. And then they say towards his last decade, he actually wrote from his sickbed the devotions upon emergent occasions. And they say that contains some of the most beautiful writing. And that's where the most famous line, which I didn't realize it came from John Donne, but it's, "Ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee." That's from John Donne's devotions upon emergent occasions. But he also was kind of a celebrated homilist and sermon giver, kind of a well-respected clergyman in the Anglican Church through his time, in addition to writing. And he eventually died in 1631. But they kind of mention here that these poems do not reflect the kind of intellectual struggles that question the reality and existence of God. So they talk about, yes, he had doubts, but it wasn't about God's existence. It was about the struggle to follow God's way and recognizing the human condition, which so much struggled to do that. They actually have an excerpt of a poem, part of the Sonnets, called Sonnet 14, and it kind of talks about this reality of dealing with death, but the hope that he has beyond it. So he's very real in the things, the suffering, the shortcomings, the struggles, the sin of the human life, but yet the hope that we find in Christ beyond that, even with the soul's inability to live it. So there's a very honest, kind of relatable aspect to his writing, which they say that really every man and woman could relate to when it comes to that. One of the quotes they have, "God is never a spiritual abstraction in Donne's poetry, but one with whom he has sometimes troubled personal relationship." This is an interesting line. "Spiritual victory requires being, in a sense, defeated by God." So kind of our human desire to resist God, and that kind of the spiritual battle is really to let God defeat us, as opposed to being overtaken by the things of this world. So it kind of has me interested in to pursue Donne and read him a little bit more. Admittedly, I haven't. And again, I struggle with poetry, but from a poet's perspective, very kind of critically acclaimed. So I read the last kind of paragraph that gives a summary at the end. "The abundance of God's mercy is absolutely central to Donne's theology, as that is the reality upon which all our hope can rest. Our lives will be a constant and unending struggle against the power of the flesh, but the end of all that struggle has already been determined. We will be embraced by the God who loves us passionately. Through his poems and his other writings, Donne is a companion for the trenches of life, the endless battle to live out the grace we have been offered. His impatience with his own failings and his willingness to tear off the veil of piety to express his deepest interior battles and spiritual longings make him the contemporary of every man and woman." They say that he doesn't use kind of pious religious language, but very kind of real, raw, tearing off the veil from the piety, so to speak. So John Donne, his Holy Sonnets, part of the poetry that every Catholic should know. Encourage you to check out some of these meditations in these leather-bound publishers, done by St. Benedict Press, by Tan, does quite a few of them, Tan Publishing, but good stuff to keep our daily prayer and reflection going. So thanks for joining me. Next on the masterpieces, number 19, more poetry, The Temple by George Herbert, also found in this book, and we'll get to see what he has to say also in 1633. Thanks again. Have a great day. God bless.